This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to this WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Kate Fisher, and in this bulletin we update you on stories developing around the world. First of all, let's take a look at the headlines. The Taliban announces UN-sanctioned Taliban veteran Mullah Mohammed Hassan Akhund as the leader of their new government, while giving key positions to at least 17 UN-sanctioned men in the government. Afghan women continue to protest against the new Taliban regime. The new administration has no women in the ranks. Beijing says it welcomes the end of 3 weeks of anarchy in Afghanistan with the establishment of a new interim government in Kabul, labelling it a necessary step to rebuilding the country. The biggest trial in France's modern history begins with 20 suspects accused over attacks in Paris that saw 130 people killed in November 2015. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is hit by stones on the campaign trail in Ontario as crowds shout their opposition to COVID-19 vaccines.
China has a real problem with the Taliban, so they're going to try to work out some arrangement with Taliban, I'm sure. As does Pakistan, as does Russia, as does Iran.
Amid concerns that China would fund the Taliban, US President Joe Biden says he expects China to try to work out some arrangement with the group as it announced its government in Kabul. Seeds of resistance are sprouting through women protesters in Afghanistan, chanting slogans against the Taliban and its neighbour Pakistan. Women are vehemently demanding their basic rights and female representation in the government after the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. A group of female protesters in a Kabul neighbourhood took to the streets, holding placards with slogans against the Taliban. The protest comes after the Taliban announced an all-male interim government for Afghanistan, thus eliminating women's representation and political participation in the new government.
Muhtaram Al-Haj Mullah Mohammed Hassan Akhund, Sarparasti Riyasat al-Wazara. محترم ملا عبدالغنی برادر معاون ریاست الوزراء، محترم مولوی محمد یعقوب مجاهد سرپرست وزارت الدفاع.
But women are having none of that. Visuals on your screen show how Taliban fighters are trying to stop these brave women. But determined to battle for their rights, they continued marching despite facing reprisal. Protests by Afghan women against Taliban restrictions that began in Herat have spread to Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif. It was only yesterday that scores of women chanted anti-Pakistan slogans, further voicing their support for the resistance against the Taliban in the Panjshir province.
We are protesting because we don't want a dictatorial government. We don't want ISI's government. They're interfering in our country's domestic war. We are protesting to support the women, and we came here to support the National Resistance Front.
with many raising their voice against the discrimination and exclusion of women from the government.
Are women not included in the political issues? When they say that they are having talks and they're voting for the formation of the new government, there is no woman anywhere in their voting campaign. Why they don't want to have a woman as a representative of all women in their voting and talks or to participate?
With women's freedom seemingly sharply curtailed in Taliban 2.0, a question mark hangs over the fate of Afghan women and their rights. Well, WION correspondent Anis Malik is in Kabul. He's been reporting from Afghanistan. And just tell us what is happening on the ground right now, Anas.
You need to call me.
Four arrests in Hong Kong on Wednesday dealt a new blow to the city's opposition movement. Those detained are all members of the pro-democracy group that organises a yearly vigil in Hong Kong for the bloody crackdown in Tiananmen Square. The June 4th event commemorates those killed when China quashed 1989's student-led protests. Activist and barrister Chow Hang-tong was arrested along with 3 others from the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements in China. A day before her arrest, Chow spoke to reporters outside police headquarters.
The more we resist, the more they will suppress you. But whether it would be better not to resist, I don't think so. If you give up and don't fight, they will not let you go. As we have seen, they have been chasing after all the disbanded groups.
She had been at the headquarters to deliver a message to officers that the alliance would not provide the information they had requested. Last month, police had sent a letter to the organisation giving it until Tuesday this week to provide details of its membership, finances and activities. The letter accused the alliance of being an agent of foreign forces, adding that failure to comply with the deadline could result in a fine and 6 months in jail. Alliance leaders Albert Ho and Lee Chuk-yang are already in jail over their roles in anti-government protests that roared the city in 2019. The National Security Department said that investigations were ongoing and did not rule out further arrests.
France, meanwhile, has started a marathon trial over the November 2015 Paris attacks. This is the biggest trial in France's modern history. 20 suspects are charged over the 2015 Paris attacks, which killed 130 people and injured hundreds in suicide bombing and gun assault. Security has been tightened as France prepares to open the biggest trial in the country's history. The trial is set to take place in a secure modern complex embedded in the original 13th century Paris courthouse. The area around the court has been blocked off ahead of the proceedings with armed police and dogs on patrol. The lone surviving attacker, Salah Abdeslam, is the key defendant among those being tried for the deadliest attack in France since World War II. He is the only one charged with murder. Salah Abdeslam will be in the dock with 13 other defendants. 6 others are being tried in absentia. 12 out of the 20 people on trial, including Abdeslam, will face life sentences if convicted.
I would like to know, like the victim and like you, everyone, I would like to know some explanation, but I think he will not say anything.
What springs to the mind is at last. Here we are. It's been 6 years, close to 6 years, and so we will now be able to know the rest, get some answers to our questions. Maybe not all of them, but at least this will help us to move on.
I am completely serene. That's my state of mind. It was much more complicated at first. 5 years have passed and I hope that the truth will be told and be provided. That's my state of mind.
Journalists have arrived outside the Paris courthouse on the opening morning of the trial. None of the proceedings will be televised or rebroadcast to the public, but they will be recorded for archival purposes. The entire month of September will be dedicated to the police and forensic evidence. October will be dedicated to the victims' testimonies. And from November to December, officials, including the former French President François Hollande, will testify along with the relatives of the attackers. The hearings are expected to continue for 9 months. The suicide bombing and gun assault were carried out by 3 teams of jihadists in Paris. A total of 9 gunmen and suicide bombers struck within minutes of each other, first at France's National Soccer Stadium, then at the Bataclan Concert Hall, and then at Paris restaurants and cafes in one of the worst post-war atrocities on French territory. These terror attacks were planned in Syria and were later claimed by the Islamic State group. And as we continue to track those developments, handing it back to my colleague Kate Fisher. Kate?
Well, we'll have more on that developing story throughout the days and weeks to come on WION. Now let's move on to Canada. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing dual challenges. He's not only slipped in the polls, but he's now facing the anger of the masses. A group of vaccine protesters recently threw gravel at him on the campaign trail. This as the snap elections enter the final stretch. And in the latest development, Trudeau has denounced that violent act by vaccine protesters.
Very clear and state the obvious, first and foremost. It is absolutely unacceptable that people be throwing things and endangering others at a political rally. There were volunteers and supporters. There are police officers there to keep everyone safe. There were journalists such as yourselves doing a really important job informing Canadians of what's going on in this election and some of the tensions that are out there. Nobody should be doing their jobs under the threat or under the threats of violence or acts that put them in danger. That's absolutely unacceptable. That's not how we do things in Canada.
Video cameras captured what looks to be white gravel hitting Trudeau and one of his bodyguards. The incident took place as he walked past a crowd shouting their opposition to COVID-19 vaccines. Earlier, Trudeau played down the incident, but later he lashed out at those who endangered others at a political rally. The incident also drew condemnation from Trudeau's rivals, O'Toole and New Democratic Party leader Jagmeet Singh, who have said that political violence is not justified. Remember, the attack on the Canadian Prime Minister comes during a crucial week of campaigning, with 2 scheduled debates that could tip the election scales. A rolling Nanos research survey of 1,200 people for CTV has put the Liberals at 34.1% and the Conservatives at 32%. So the fight is neck and neck. However, experts suggest that Mr. Trudeau's popularity is dipping. While Trudeau is hoping that his management of the COVID crisis would propel his victory, his handling of the pandemic is being questioned. Canadian health officials have warned of a deadly wave if vaccinations among young adults do not ramp up. The Canadian Prime Minister has recently faced off on several occasions with what he described as anti-vaxxer mobs, and a small fringe element in this country that is angry, that doesn't believe in science. Protesters have shouted racial and misogynist slurs at his entourage. Demonstrations also targeted hospitals across Canada that are struggling with a sudden spike in COVID cases. Candidate lawn signs have been defaced with anti-Semitic graffiti. In late August, Trudeau was forced to cancel an event over security concerns. Mexico's top court has decriminalised abortion. Lawmakers unanimously annulled several provisions of a law that made abortion a criminal act. The move establishes an historical precedent. It's a big turning point for Mexico, which is the second biggest Roman Catholic country, a religion that opposes all forms of abortion. This report has all the details.
Mexico's Supreme Court unanimously ruled on Tuesday that penalising abortion is unconstitutional. The president of the country's highest court described the decision as a watershed moment for all women, especially the most vulnerable. The decision is a big turning point for Mexico, which is the second biggest Roman Catholic country in the world that opposes all forms of abortion. The ruling means that courts can no longer prosecute abortion cases, and follows the historic legalisation of the right to abortion in Argentina, which took effect earlier this year. Demonstrators took to the streets across the country celebrating the news. Some women wore green bandanas to symbolise the pro-choice movement, and others held placards. Frances Piran was in Mexico City.
We thank the judges, millions of women living in this country, and the millions of women who live in the city. Thank the judges for saving lives. We're going to have public policies that allow us to get secure care on all issues of health.
There were demonstrations, however, against the ruling too. Some said the focus should be on support for a woman or alternatives like adoption. Hundreds of mostly poor Mexican women have been prosecuted for abortion, and at least several dozen remain in jail. In the state of Coahuila, local government issued a statement saying the ruling would have retroactive effects and that any woman imprisoned for abortion should be released immediately. The decision is in stark contrast to the situation across the border in the US, where a number of states, including Texas, have restricted women's access to abortion. Tuesday's ruling may lead American women to travel south of the border to terminate their pregnancies.
A gold rush has been wreaking havoc across the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. Nearly 5,000 illegal mines have been thriving in the area at a massive cost to the environment. Here are the details.
Amazon, the world's largest rainforest, is home to diverse flora and fauna. The forest also contains prized minerals including gold. In fact, more than 90% of Brazil's gold mines are located in and around the Amazon. Gold digging sites have spread to reserved areas and indigenous land. The number of both legal and illegal mines have been rising, and they are inflicting irreversible damage on the environment.
It is very difficult for nature to recover from illegal mining. Even with human intervention, the mercury that is used in extraction brings about other problems in public health, especially for those who live in the shores of the river and in the indigenous population.
The impact is severe. Unregulated activities have led to deforestation and encroachment. Pollution too remains a major issue. Mercury, which is used to separate gold from grit, often leaks into the rivers, threatening trees, animals and the local population. Miners say that they are aware of the risks but are forced to work at the mines due to lack of job opportunities and poverty.
There are no jobs, no good companies to employ us inside Para state. Para is a very rich region with lots of wealth. These gold medals that they won abroad, where does it come from? From our backs.
So what has the government been doing? It appointed a task force which has shut several mining camps. Yet, illegal gold mining continues to thrive. There are nearly 5,000 such sites in the area. Activists say that authorities are not doing enough to curb the issue. They blame President Jair Bolsonaro's environmental policies for the further degradation of the Amazon. This, as Bolsonaro has been pushing for expansion of commercial mining in the Amazon. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And with that, we'll call it a wrap on this live broadcast from Washington, D.C. But for more global news updates, stay tuned to WION. World is One.
This is right, Arab.